everyone, this is Alice from Aquinas Tuition. Today we are continuing our National 5 RUAE series and we're going to be focusing on how to answer imagery questions. So first of all, what is imagery? Well, imagery is a type of description that writers use that appeals to the 5 senses. Essentially what it does is it paints a picture of something in your mind. Now, at National 5, the type of imagery that examiners want you to be able to identify is something called figurative language. So that's a type of imagery where comparisons are made between things that are dissimilar for a specific effect. There are 3 types of figurative imagery that you need to be aware of. They're going to come up in this green box for you. You may already know these. You will probably be very aware of them. You probably will use them yourself every day without even realizing it. The first one is metaphor. So a metaphor is essentially a type of figurative language, a type of imagery that describes something being something else. So something is something else. And I'll give you an example of that shortly. Similes, again, they're comparing 2 things, but they describe those 2 things using the word like or as. So you're always able to identify what a simile is because the word like or as will be in it. The third type of imagery is personification. Now, the clue is in the word personification. Essentially, what it does is it gives inanimate objects human characteristics. So, to just do an example of a metaphor, a simile, and a personification. A clear metaphor would be, say, comparing a person to an animal. Jeffrey is a lion. There you go. Is the key word that I've used in there. He's not literally a lion, but it implies to us that he might have characteristics that are like a lion, or he might look lion-like. A simile basically can be exactly the same thing, but I would just use the term like or as in there. So Jeffrey is like a lion, or Jeffrey is as large as a lion, for instance. So I'm using the words like or as. Personification, I can't unfortunately use the Jeffrey lion comparison, so I'll use something else. So I need to give something that isn't alive, something that is inanimate, a human characteristic. So let's go for something like the chair squealed when he sat on it. Okay, so inanimate objects don't squeal. Squealing is something that we associate with a human noise or even an animal noise. It's a form of personification. All right, so those are the 3 different types of figurative language. Right, I have 4 pieces of imagery on this slide. It's time for you to pause the video and identify which is which is a metaphor, which is a simile, which is a personification. Okay, so first up, lightning danced across the sky. The clue is in danced. That's something that humans do. Therefore, we are going to say it's personification. I'll put a P next to it. We are all in the same boat. Clearly a metaphor. We're not literally in a boat together. There isn't a like or an as there, so therefore it's a metaphor. The avalanche devoured anything standing in its way. Okay, the clue is in devoured. That is a human characteristic. You devour something when you're very hungry, therefore it's personification. Her mouth was a political megaphone. Well, her mouth literally isn't a megaphone, therefore it is a metaphor because there isn't a like or an as there. Hopefully those have matched up with what you had. Let's have a think about how to answer imagery questions at National 5 then. The method is very simple and I'm going to show you how to do that. I have used an example of a very, very famous metaphor that is in Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. Romeo over here describes Juliet as the sun. In a famous line he says, Juliet is the sun. So here's Juliet. He is comparing her to the sun, that flaming ball of fire in the sky. It's obviously a metaphor. There's no like or as in that quote. It is very clearly a metaphor. At National 5, in order to get 2 marks for the metaphor, the simile, or the personification that you are commenting on, you always, first of all, in your first bullet point, have to identify the type of image it is, and you need to quote it. That would get you 1 mark. So you have to identify a metaphor, a simile, or personification, and then quote it. In the second part, where you do your analysis, for metaphors and similes, not for personification, I'm going to show you that later, just for metaphors and similes, you use a specific wording in your analysis comment, and it's called the just as, so to wording. And you have to make sure in that just as, so to wording that you recognize the comparison. And that would get you the 2nd mark available if it was a 2-mark question. If it was a 4-mark question, you'd do that twice with a separate quote. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this just as, so to wording now. In the just as, so to wording, you have to think about it in 2 parts. The first part, you say at the beginning, just as, and then you have to explain the connotations of the comparison image. So in this case, you would be talking about the connotations of what the sun is. And I'll give you an example in 30 seconds. In the second part of the just as, so to wording, you have to therefore say so to, and then you explain what that image suggests about the thing being described. This sounds complicated, but in practice, it's very easy. Here's my example. For my first bullet point, I've done metaphor. Juliet is the sun, so I've got 1 mark. So that's me doing that first bit. This is me doing the just as, so to wording, the second bit over here. Just as the sun is bright, warm, and something that we rely on for life. That's me explaining the connotations of what the sun is. So too is the writer suggesting that Juliet's beauty lights up the room and is something that Romeo cannot live without. It also implies that Juliet might be joyful and warm-hearted, and that Romeo feels his entire life will revolve around her. In this second bit, I've therefore explained what being compared to the sun tells us about Romeo's feelings for Juliet, but also what it tells us about Juliet. This is a really nicely developed second part of the just as, so to formula, because I have talked about what it tells us about Juliet, but also what it tells us about Romeo's feelings for her, e.g., her beauty lights up the room. But also, just like human beings and life on Earth can't live without the sun, it suggests that Romeo cannot live without her. Then I've developed it even more by doing the second sentence here. It also implies that Juliet might be joyful and warm-hearted, and that Romeo feels his entire life will revolve around her. I've really tried to develop it there. I probably didn't actually need to do this second sentence, but it's just me showing you how to get a really high-level answer at National 5. It's time for you to have a go now. The teenager's room was a bomb site. Remember, in your first bullet point, you need to identify what type of image that is and quote it. Then you need to use the just as, so to wording to ensure that you recognize the comparison. That will give you the 2nd mark. Pause this video and have a go. This is my example answer. So metaphor, the teenager's room was a bomb site. Just as a bomb site is chaotic, lifeless, and a place of destruction, so too is the teenager's room incredibly messy, difficult to access, and potentially unpleasant. Very clear in that first part. I have obviously described what a bomb site is like, what its connotations are. In the second part, I have linked that specifically to what it's saying, therefore, about the teenager's room. Easy. I'd like you to have another go now. This one is obviously not a metaphor. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I'd like you to pause the video, have a go. Again, make sure that you follow this specific formula. Right, hopefully you have got a good answer for that. She was tough as an old boot. I'm obviously using an as in there, so that identifies a simile for us. Hopefully you've got a good answer for that, and hopefully this is starting to make sense. We are going to go on to the last form of imagery that you need to know at National 5. It's personification. So that is when you take an inanimate object and you give it human characteristics. Now, analysis of personification is a little bit different to analysis of metaphors and similes. The just as so to formula doesn't work quite as well in this case, so you have to do something a little bit different, but don't worry, it's not complicated, it's very simple. This method should work instead. Exactly the same first bullet point, you identify the image type and you quote it, and instead of doing the just as so to, you just say this suggests. Very similar to your word choice analysis at National 5. Let's have a look at an example. So, the tall trees guarded the entrance of the palace. In my first bullet point, I'm identifying the image, personification, I'm quoting it, the tall trees guarded. Then I am using my suggests analysis sentence starter in order to analyse that piece of personification. This suggests that the trees stand upright and firmly outside the palace, implying they are imposing as if they are protecting the building. Really nice bit of analysis there. I've talked about how them being personified as guards and they're guarded the entrance, suggests that they're imposing and that they're protecting the building. Really nice and clear. Okay, you have a go. Pause the video. Make sure that you follow the methods given. Right, guys, we are now going to have a little think about how at National 5 an imagery question might be worded. One thing that you need to be aware of is that sometimes they might say specifically they want you to answer on imagery. So they might say something like this: analyze an image that shows a specific thing. So analyze one image that shows the intensity of the match. It's an example that I've pulled out here. But again, remember in the word choice tutorial, I said that at National 5, they can often put it under an umbrella term, use of language. So they might say, analyze how the writer uses language to show the intensity of the match. Okay, so I'm going to just put UOL. So if you get a use of language and there's a really clear bit of imagery that you feel confident analysing, then go for it. Okay. So let's have a look at this example together. The football pitch was a battlefield under the floodlights. Players clashed like storms meeting head-on. Sweat poured as the grass screamed beneath their boots. Victory hovered just out of reach. The crowd roared, a single powerful beast. Now, this is a very over-the-top description, but it essentially uses imagery in almost every single sentence. So there's so much stuff that you could comment on here. So my example is going to be was a battlefield under the floodlights, but there's so many other forms of imagery that you can pick up on in this short paragraph. For instance, clashed like storms is a simile. Sweat poured as the grass screamed, that's personification. Victory hovered just out of reach, another form of personification. The crowd roared, a single powerful beast is a metaphor. Okay, so there's loads of stuff that you could comment on. Let's have a look at my example. So my first bullet point, I've identified that it's a metaphor and I've quoted it, was a battlefield. I'm going to use the just as so to formula because it's a metaphor. Just as a battlefield is a place of warfare, of brutal fighting to the death, so too was the football match filled with furious fighting from both sides to ensure that their team won. It implies that things were perhaps violent as both teams wanted to win so badly. There you go, really nice and clear. I've used the just as, talking about battlefield, what are the connotations of battlefield, and then I've done so too, and I've basically explained how the football match was like that. Okay, easy. Have a go at another one that I've underlined yourself. Pause the video for a couple of minutes while you do that. Remember, for personification, you have to identify the image type and quote it, and then use this suggests as your analysis. For a metaphor and simile, if you want to do that, identify the type of the image, quote it with your example for 1 mark, and then use the just as so too. Fantastic. So hopefully you have got an example down that you are happy with. Let's have a go at one more. Select an example of imagery and explain how it builds tension or fear. Night swallowed the forest whole, its darkness a thick blanket. The trees stood like ancient guards watching in silence. Moonlight danced across the leaves, teasing the shadows. The wind whispered secrets through the branches. Fear crept along the path beside him. Again, loads and loads of imagery options for you in this. The one that I've chosen is watching in silence. This is a personification, so I thought it was good for me to demonstrate that for you. This creates an atmosphere of fear and tension as it implies that the narrator feels as if he is under surveillance, that he is not alone. I obviously didn't use the suggests. I just didn't think it worked in relation to this. So creates is also absolutely fine. You could use suggests, but it just didn't necessarily make sense in relation to my analytical comment here. I've linked it directly to fear and tension, and I have picked up on the idea of watching under surveillance, that he's not alone. That creates the fear and tension. Again, pause the video, have a go. There are your 2 examples of formulas to help you if you need it. Cool guys, so that is the end of our imagery tutorial. I hope this has been helpful. Please do comment in the comment section, obviously, if you have any questions or if you want us to check answers, that's absolutely fine. If you would like some further practice on imagery questions, then head over to our website, go to the download section, English National 5, and you will see the imagery questions and mark schema there for you. If you would like some tutoring, if you've got any questions, then don't hesitate to contact us. Our email is there as well, but you can also fill out a form on the website. I hope that you have a really lovely rest of your week, and I will see you very soon.